I held the key to destroying the most beloved man in our city, a weapon forged in 30 years of silence and grief, and it had been hiding in my dead aunt's attic. His name was Marcus Harrison, a pillar of our community, a philanthropist whose generosity was the stuff of local legend. He was a man poised to become our next mayor, a man whose smile could charm a snake from a basket and convince you it was a songbird. He was also a man who thought he had buried his darkest secret forever, leaving it in a shallow grave on a forgotten country road. But he hadn't accounted for my Aunt Clara. He hadn't accounted for her patience, her quiet resilience, and the ghost she left behind to hand me the means for his spectacular public destruction. Before we dive into the secret I've carried, a burden that has reshaped my world, please take a second to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and drop a comment below guessing what the final twist will be. Now, where were we? My name is Alara, and I am 32 years old. A year ago, I stood in a windswept cemetery and buried the only mother I ever truly knew, my Aunt Clara. My own parents were fleeting figures in my life, humanitarian ghosts perpetually chasing noble causes in countries I could barely pronounce. They loved me, I suppose, in their abstract, global way, but it was Clara who was there. She was the anchor for my scraped knees, the calm voice during midnight fears, the steady hand that guided me through life's tempests. She was my constant, a woman who felt as permanent and comforting as a sunrise. Her house, which was now my house, operated on a rhythm of quiet, unconditional love. It was a symphony of familiar scents, lavender potpourri in little satin bags tucked into drawers, the crisp, acidic scent of old paper from her library, and the faint, sweet perfume of the African violets she fussed over in the bay window. Clara was my anchor in a world that often felt adrift. It was her hands that held the back of my bicycle seat, her encouraging words that buffered my falls, her legs that ran behind me until I finally found my balance and pedaled away on my own. On clear nights, she'd lead me into the backyard, her hand warm in mine, and teach me to find Orion's belt and the Big Dipper, telling me stories of ancient gods and heroes written in the stars. She taught me to find solace in the gentle melodies of classical music she'd hum while baking her famous lemon drizzle cake, a scent that to this day is the smell of safety. Her life, as she told it, was a simple, polished story, a quiet childhood in a small town, an only child to loving parents who passed away when she was young. "It was just me, kiddo," she'd say with a soft, distant smile that I now see was tinged with a sorrow I couldn't possibly comprehend. Always has been. Her sudden illness was a thief, a cruel and efficient storm that ripped her from my world in a matter of months. In the wake of her death, grief was a physical presence, a suffocating blanket that stole the color from my life. Her house, once a sanctuary of warmth, became a cold, silent monument to everything I had lost. Going through her belongings was a slow, deliberate torture. Every teacup with its delicate, painted flowers, every worn cardigan that still held her faint scent, was a fresh wound. It was during the final, emotionally draining clear out of the attic, a space thick with the scent of cedar and forgotten time, that I found it. Tucked away in a dark, dusty corner, behind a teetering stack of my old school projects and forgotten Christmas decorations, was a plain wooden box, no bigger than one for shoes, secured with a simple, tarnished brass lock. It was utterly unremarkable, easily overlooked. I pulled it out, dust motes dancing in the single beam of light from the attic window. I shook it, but it only made a soft, muffled thud, as if padded with cloth. I spent a whole afternoon consumed by a strange, fleeting curiosity, searching for a key in every drawer, jewelry case, and hidden nook I could think of, but found nothing. Overwhelmed by the sheer weight of sorrow and exhaustion, I dismissed it. It was just another piece of a past I was desperate to move on from. With a heavy sigh, I labeled it Aunt Clara Miscellaneous in black marker and shoved it onto the highest shelf in my closet, a forgotten footnote in a life I thought I knew completely. I was so devastatingly, tragically wronged at a full year past. The sharp, jagged edges of grief had softened into a dull, persistent ache. I was trying to rebuild, to find a new normal. One evening, I found myself at a city fundraising gala, an opulent event I'd been dragged to by my boss. I felt lost in a sea of champagne, air kisses, and superficial chatter when I heard a voice that pulled me back a decade. "Ilara, is that really you?" I turned, and my breath caught in my throat. It was Mr. Harrison, my charismatic senior-year American literature teacher, the one who taught us to see the subtext in everything. He was more distinguished now, his dark hair a handsome silver at the temples, but his smile was the same, a weapon of charm that could disarm an entire room. He wasn't just a teacher anymore. He was a local hero, a celebrated philanthropist, and the clear front-runner in the upcoming mayoral election. "Mr. Harrison," I said, a genuine smile spreading across my face for the first time all evening. "Wow, it's been so long. I thought you'd moved away for good." He laughed, a warm, booming sound that made heads turn. "I came back to my roots, Ilara, and now I'm trying to give back to the city that made me." We fell into easy conversation, reminiscing about class projects and old friends. But when he asked about my family, my smile faltered. I told him about Aunt Clara's passing. That's when it happened. For a split second, the mask of a charming public servant slipped. A shadow, cold and predatory, flickered in his eyes before being instantly replaced by a performance of profound sadness. "Oh, Ilara, I am so sorry to hear that," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. Clara and I were old friends. A long, long time ago." The way he said her name felt like a violation, a trespass on sacred ground. Then he leaned in, his expression a careful construction of gentle, paternal concern. "This is going to sound incredibly strange," he began, his gaze locking onto mine with unnerving intensity. "But when you were going through her things, did you happen to find a small, plain wooden box with a lock?" The air in my lungs turned to ice. The ballroom noise, the clinking glasses, the swell of the orchestra, it all faded into a dull, roaring hum. The box, the forgotten box on the top shelf of my closet. How in the world could this man, this beloved public figure, possibly know about it? My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of dread. He wasn't just an old teacher. He was a character in a story I never knew was being written. I managed to whisper, my mouth suddenly dry. He let out a slow, theatrical sigh of relief, placing a hand over his heart. "I was hoping you had. Look, Clara made me promise, if anything ever happened to her, I was to help you understand her past. She wanted you to have closure." He insisted on coming to the house that very evening, framing it as an urgent, solemn duty to his old friend. I found myself agreeing, a storm of confusion and a terrifying, magnetic curiosity pulling me under. That night, the house felt different. The silence was no longer empty. It was filled with unseen things, with 30 years of waiting secrets. When the doorbell rang, the sound was an electric shock to my system. Mr. Harrison stood on my porch, no longer the charming politician from the gala, but a man playing the part of a somber priest about to deliver a final rite. I led him to the living room and, with trembling hands, retrieved the box, placing it on the coffee table between us. It sat there like a time bomb. "I haven't seen this in 30 years," he murmured, running a hand over the lid with a false, practiced reverence. Then, from his tailored coat pocket, he produced a small, old-fashioned brass key. My blood ran cold. He didn't just know about the box. He had a key. "Brace yourself," he said, his eyes full of practiced pity that made my skin crawl. Clara was a deeply troubled woman. The story she told you about her life, it wasn't the truth. He inserted the key. With a loud click that echoed like a bone snapping in the quiet room, the lock sprang open. He lifted the lid, and my first feeling was one of utter confusion. The box was filled with a stack of yellowed letters, tied with a faded ribbon. On top sat a black and white photograph of a radiant, beautiful young woman I'd never seen, with a defiant spark in her eyes and a smile that seemed to challenge the world. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "That," Mr. Harrison said softly, "is Eleanor. Your Aunt Eleanor, Clara's younger sister." The words were a physical blow. "A sister? An aunt I never knew existed? That's impossible," I stammered, shaking my head. "Clara was an only child. She told me my whole life. She wanted to be," he said, his voice dripping with a carefully measured sorrow. He then spun a masterful, poisonous tale. He explained that he and the beautiful, vibrant Eleanor had been deeply in love, soulmates destined for a life together. But Clara, he claimed, was pathologically jealous. She was unstable, obsessed with him herself, and couldn't bear to see her younger sister happy. He picked up the letters, his hands trembling with manufactured emotion. "She wrote these," he said, handing one to me. I scanned the lines. They were hateful, filled with a desperate, twisted rage, supposedly from Clara to Eleanor, threatening her, telling her to stay away from him. Then he showed me the yellowed newspaper clipping from the bottom of the box. The headline read, "Young woman dies in tragic roadside accident." It was Eleanor. According to the story Mr. Harrison wove, Eleanor had been fleeing in her car after a terrible, violent fight with a hysterical Clara. He painted himself as the tragic victim, the man who had lost the love of his life to his beloved's unhinged, malevolent sister. He presented my Aunt Clara, my anchor, my North Star, as a monster. I felt the very foundations of my world crumble to dust. Could this be true? Could the gentlest soul I'd ever known have been capable of such malice? He gathered the letters and the clipping, placing them carefully into his briefcase. "I'll take these," he said gently. "It's better to protect her memory, to not let this version of her get out. Let's just remember the Clara we loved." He was erasing the evidence of his own story. He left me in the ruins of my own home, my mind a battleground of love and doubt, having successfully planted the seeds of a monstrous lie that I was at a crossroads, about to either condemn the woman who raised me or fight for her memory. If you've ever had to question everything you believed, hit that like button. Now, let's get back to the moment everything truly broke. 4 days, I was a ghost in Clara's house, tortured by the image he had painted of her as a hateful, jealous creature. Every loving memory was now tainted, suspect. I looked at photos of her holding me as a baby, her loving smile now seeming like a grotesque mask. The grief I felt was no longer just for her death, but for her life, a life that might have been a complete and utter fabrication. I was drowning in the confusion he had so expertly crafted. It was in that state of absolute despair, while packing away the last of her photo albums, that my fingers brushed against something loose behind a picture of me and Clara on my 5th birthday, both of us covered in chocolate cake. My heart stopped. It was a small, hidden flap in the cardboard backing. My fingers trembled as I pried it open. Inside a tiny, velvet-lined cavity was not a letter, but a microcassette tape and a single, tiny, tarnished silver key. A note was wrapped around the key in Clara's familiar, spidery handwriting, for my Alara. The real key, the real story. He has the lie. You have the truth. Forgive me. My entire body went numb. The real key. He had a copy. With shaking hands, I fetched the box from the living room. I ignored the main lock he had opened and turned the box over, searching frantically. There, nearly invisible against the dark wood grain, was a minuscule, pin-sized keyhole on the bottom panel. The tiny silver key fit perfectly. I turned it, and a section of the base popped open with a soft click, revealing a hidden compartment. His letters, the forgeries, lay on top, a testament to his deceit. Beneath them, tied in a bright blue ribbon, was the truth. It was Clara's diary and a thick stack of letters from Eleanor. The real letters. Together, they didn't just rewrite the story, they set it on fire. The truth was 1,000 times worse than his lie. Mr. Harrison, then a young, magnetic teacher at the local high school, hadn't been Eleanor's lover, he was her stalker. He was obsessed with her, a predator hiding in plain sight. Eleanor's letters to Clara were filled not with love for him, but with sheer, escalating terror. He followed her home from school, sent her unwanted gifts, and threatened any boy she so much as talked to. He was waiting by my car again today. Clara, one letter read. He says he just wants to talk, but his eyes, they scare me. Clara's diary detailed their desperate plan. Eleanor had secretly recorded Harrison threatening her, capturing his obsession on the microcassette tape. She was supposed to meet Clara that night at the old lookout on Miller's Road, give her the tape for safekeeping, and then they were going to the police together the next morning. But Clara's diary entry for that night was a frantic, tear-blotted scrawl. He found out. Harrison knows she has the tape. He went after her. I saw his car speeding towards Miller's Road. He was going so fast. Oh, God! Ellie, please be careful. The accident wasn't an accident. He ran her off the road to silence her. Clara, hiding in the woods nearby, witnessed the whole thing. She saw his car slam into her sister's, saw the vehicle tumble down the embankment, and saw him speed away into the darkness. But Harrison, paranoid and evil, came back. He found the terrified 17-year-old Clara and gave her an ultimatum. Stay silent, or he would use the letters he'd forged to frame her for her own sister's murder, using her jealousy as a motive. He broke her, threatening to destroy her family and her future. And so for 30 years, my gentle, kind aunt lived in a prison of silence and fear. She carried the weight of her sister's death and the secret of her murderer, protecting the one piece of evidence that could prove it all. Her quiet, routine-filled life wasn't a simple one. It was a cage built by a monster. The final piece clicked into place. Harrison's run for mayor wasn't just ambition. It was a desperate move to secure his power and bury his past for good. He tracked me down because he knew that box was a loose end, a time bomb he had to defuse before it detonated his life. His arrogance was his undoing. He thought I was just like Clara, a quiet, easily manipulated girl he could scare into submission. He underestimated me. He underestimated a lifetime of love Clara had poured into me, a love that now turned into a cold, hard diamond of fury. My vengeance wouldn't be a secret whispered in the dark. It would be a symphony of destruction, played out on the grandest stage he had built for himself. His final campaign fundraising gala was the biggest political event of the year, live-streamed across the state. He stood at the podium, a portrait of integrity, speaking about community, safety, and protecting the vulnerable. He was basking in the thunderous applause, his victory all but assured. And I, from the quiet of Clara's living room, gave the signal. I had spent the past week leveraging my skills as a digital archivist, befriending a low-level, disgruntled tech on his campaign, and exploiting a backdoor in the event's AV system he'd shown me. As Harrison smiled for the cameras, his face beaming with triumph, the 3 enormous screens behind him flickered. His smiling campaign portrait was replaced by the beautiful, haunting photograph of Eleanor. A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. Then, Clara's words, her heart-wrenching diary entries, began to scroll slowly across the screens for all to read. He followed her. He wouldn't leave her alone. She was so scared. The hall fell into a stunned, absolute silence. And then the audio began. The low crackle of a 30-year-old microcassette filled the cavernous space. And then his voice, young, dripping with rage and entitlement, echoed from the speakers. "You will not ruin me, Ellie. You are mine. You think you can tell people? I'll put you in the ground before I let you tell anyone." The sound of a car door slamming cut through the audio. Finally, one last diary entry scrolled across the screen in giant letters, stark and damning. He ran her off the road. He killed my sister. He killed her baby. The feed cut back to Harrison's face live. The mask of the beloved philanthropist was gone, replaced by the slack-jawed, ashen horror of a murderer unmasked. His carefully constructed world didn't just crack. It vaporized in a live, public execution of his legacy. It was over. The final piece clicked into place. Harrison's run for mayor wasn't just ambition. It was a desperate move to secure his power and bury his past for good. He tracked me down because he knew that box was a loose end, a time bomb he had to defuse before it detonated his life. His arrogance was his undoing. He thought I was just like Clara, a quiet, easily manipulated girl he could scare into submission. He underestimated me. He underestimated a lifetime of love Clara had poured into me, a love that now turned into a cold, hard diamond of fury. My vengeance wouldn't be a secret whispered in the dark. It would be a symphony of destruction, played out on the grandest stage he had built for himself. His final campaign fundraising gala was the biggest political event of the year, live-streamed across the state. He stood at the podium, a portrait of integrity, speaking about community, safety, and protecting the vulnerable. He was basking in the thunderous applause, his victory all but assured. And I, from the quiet of Clara's living room, gave the signal. I had spent the past week leveraging my skills as a digital archivist, befriending a low-level, disgruntled tech on his campaign, and exploiting a backdoor in the event's AV system he'd shown me. As Harrison smiled for the cameras, his face beaming with triumph, the 3 enormous screens behind him flickered. His smiling campaign portrait was replaced by the beautiful, haunting photograph of Eleanor. A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. Then Clara's words, her heart-wrenching diary entries, began to scroll slowly across the screens for all to read. He followed her. He wouldn't leave her alone. She was so scared. The hall fell into a stunned, absolute silence. And then the audio began. The low crackle of the 30-year-old microcassette filled the cavernous space. And then his voice, young, dripping with rage and entitlement, echoed from the speakers. "You will not ruin me, Ellie. You are mine. You think you can tell people? I'll put you in the ground before I let you tell anyone." The sound of a car door slamming cut through the audio. Finally, one last diary entry scrolled across the screen in giant letters, stark and damning. He ran her off the road. He killed my sister. He killed her baby. The feed cut back to Harrison's face live. The mask of the beloved philanthropist was gone, replaced by the slack-jawed, ashen horror of a murderer unmasked. His carefully constructed world didn't just crack. It vaporized in a live, public execution of his legacy. It was over that I turned off the television. The silence in the house was different now. It wasn't heavy with grief or pregnant with secrets. It was peaceful, clean. Justice, served 30 years too late, but served all the same. My aunt's love for me wasn't a lie. It was a quiet act of rebellion. She couldn't fight him, but she raised a daughter who could. She couldn't save Eleanor, but she left me the truth, trusting that I would be strong enough to know what to do with it. Her legacy wasn't the house or the money she left me. It was this moment. It was giving Eleanor her name back and showing the world the monster who had hidden behind a smile for 3 decades. The past was never gone, but for the first time, for my Aunt Clara and for her sister Eleanor, it was finally at peace. If this story left you speechless, smash that like button right now. Tell me in the comments, was justice served, or did I go too far? And don't forget to subscribe. You won't want to miss next week's chilling confession.